I sat there at the kitchen table, the dim light above casting shadows on the notepad in front of me. My pencil scratched numbers into the margins like it was some kind of desperate prayer. Money was tight, tighter than it had been in years, and I'd been doing the numbers over and over, trying to make sense of it all. A family trip? Forget it. We'd agreed, Olivia and I, that every dollar needed to go toward the fundamentals, the mortgage, the groceries, keeping the lights on. She nodded. Along when I said it, her face soft and understanding, like she got it, like we were in this together. Over the phone, her mother, Caroline, had groaned loud enough for me to hear through the speaker, going on about how awful it was that we couldn't move away, how unfortunate life could be. I rolled my eyes at that. But I let it go. The decision was made. We'd buckle down, save up, and maybe next year we'd have something to look forward to. That's what I told myself as I closed the notepad and tossed it aside, feeling a little relieved that Olivia hadn't fought me on it a week later. Things changed. I was looking through my phone, just killing time after a long day, when I saw it, a picture that hit me like a punch to the gut. There was Olivia, my wife, smiling wide, holding a glass of champagne next to her mother. Both of them dressed up like they were heading to some high-end gala. The background? It wasn't our living room, it wasn't the backyard, it was the opulent interior of a first-class airline cabin, mid-flight. They were on their way to some luxurious resort I'd never even heard of. My gut twisted into a knot so tight I could barely breathe. I stared at the screen, my thumb frozen over it, waiting for my brain to catch up with my eyes. They'd gone, without me, without even a word. I kept my mouth shut. Maybe there was a reason, I told myself. Maybe it was a last-minute thing, a gift from someone else, something I didn't understand yet. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, didn't want to let the heat swelling in my chest take over. So I waited. 2 days later, Olivia walked through the door, her luggage rolling behind her. I was ready to hear her out. She looked tanned, relaxed, like she was just coming back from paradise. I faked a grin, asked her how it went, kept my voice steady, even though my fists were clenched under the table. She smirked at me, smirked like she was proud of it, and then she said, "Maybe next time you should work harder." The words hit like a slap, stinging, cold. I felt my jaw tighten. Work harder? Me? The guy who'd been breaking his back to keep us afloat while she sipped champagne at 30,000 feet? I wanted to fire back, to ask her what the hell she meant, to demand answers. Where the money came from, why she'd lied. But I didn't. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted metal, nodded like it didn't faze me, and let her go off to unpack. She had no idea what she'd just started. That small jab. That smug grin. She'd lit a spark, and I wasn't about to let it burn out quietly. I sat there for hours, replaying her words in my head. Work harder, like I hadn't been the one keeping us steady, cutting corners, saying no to things I wanted, just so we could make it through the month. The sight of her and Caroline kept flashing in my thoughts. Their smiles, their champagne glasses. How had they paid for it? We didn't have that kind of cash lying around. I made sure of that with my constant budgeting. Had I missed something? Upstairs, Olivia hummed to herself, like nothing had happened. And I realized I couldn't just sit there pretending everything was fine. I needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. Even if it turned everything I thought I knew about us upside down. So I made a choice. Not to confront her. Not yet. But to observe. To listen. To find out what she was hiding. She thought she'd gotten away with it. Thought I'd just roll over and take it. She was wrong. This was only the beginning. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet. That kind of silence that makes your thoughts too loud to ignore. I sat in the dark, staring at nothing, the same question pounding in my head. How long had she been lying to me? I had to know. So I grabbed my laptop, logged into our bank account. My fingers trembled on the keys. Half expecting to find nothing, but there it was, a huge transfer, straight to Caroline's account, just days before they left. Hundreds. More than we could spare. I stared at the numbers, my stomach turning to lead. This wasn't some surprise gift. From a rich friend. Olivia had paid for that trip. With our money. The same money she'd agreed we needed for the mortgage, the groceries, keeping the lights on. But it didn't stop there. I kept digging, and the more I found, the worse it got. Small transfers, hidden ones, trickling into an account I didn't recognize. Coffee shop purchases I'd never made, online shopping sprees, dinners at restaurants we never went to. She'd been at this for months, building her own little hoard. She hadn't just lied to me, she'd been bleeding me dry. I wanted to march upstairs, wake her up, demand to know why. Why she lied, why she thought she could get away with it, but I didn't. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and breathed. Confronting her now would only give her a chance to spin another lie, to twist it back on me. No. I had the proof now. Screenshots, statements, dates. She didn't know I'd seen it, didn't know I was onto her. That was my advantage, and I wasn't going to waste it. As the first light of morning crept through the blinds, one thing was clear. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. She thought she'd won, she was wrong, and I was going to prove it. I stayed seated, munching at my food, letting the mayhem settle around me. Tom stared at me, his face heavy. "Sorry, Guy," he said quietly. "I didn't know she'd do something like this." I nodded, shrugged, kept it simple. Yeah, me neither. Inside, though, I felt fantastic. Better than I had in weeks. They'd seen her for what she was now, and there was no taking it back. She could rush inside, weep, yell, anything, but the truth was out. And it was mine to wield. This was just the start, and I was ready for whatever came next. I watched Olivia storm off into her sister's house, the screen door smashing shut behind her. I stayed just where I was, at that picnic table. The backyard was still humming with tension, like the air itself was holding its breath after what I'd just done. Jen was murmuring under her breath, reading over the documents I'd laid out neatly. Mike just sat there, arms crossed, shaking his head. Tom, Olivia's dad, kept staring at the point where she disappeared, his face a mix of fury and disappointment. Caroline had followed her inside, her high-pitched explanations fading as they walked. But out here, the family was already turning on them. I didn't say anything. Just let it play out. Plucking at the cold fries on my plate, I felt the weight of their eyes on me. They didn't know what to say, and I didn't need them to. The truth was doing its work. Jen was the first to break the stillness, her voice sharp and loud enough to carry. "She's so selfish," she muttered, flinging a bank statement back onto the table. "I can't believe she'd do this to you." "And with Mom egging her on, too," Mike added, leaning forward now, his elbows on the table. "Yeah, man, that's low. Taking your money like that after you guys agreed to save, that's messed up." I shrugged, maintaining my tone even. "Guess I wasn't part of the plan," I stated. That earned a grim grin out of him. Tom didn't laugh, though. He simply scratched his forehead, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I raised her better than this," he whispered, more to himself than to me. "And Caroline, God, I should have seen this coming." His words hung there, heavy, and I could sense he was blaming himself a little, even though this was all on them. At the other end of the table, friends were whispering, stealing glances my way, some shaking their heads, others murmuring about how shady it was. I caught bits in sections. First class, truly. Poor Guy didn't even know, and it felt amazing in a strange way. Not the sympathy, but the fact that Olivia couldn't hide any longer. Her immaculate little image was breaking, and everyone could see it. Jen turned to me, her eyes fierce. "You're not letting this slip, are you?" she pressed. "She can't just walk away from this." I caught her stare, keeping my face steady. "I'm handling it," I murmured. "Easy as that?" And she nodded, like she trusted me to make it right. Tom glanced up at me then, his voice gruff. "You should have told me sooner, son. I'd have straightened her out." I just nodded back. No point in explaining. I'd only figured it out myself a week ago. He was on my side now, and that's what mattered. Inside, I could hear raised voices, Olivia and Caroline presumably bickering about what to do next. Half of me wanted to walk in there, see the panic on their faces. But I stayed put. Let them stew. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Olivia marched back. Out. Her cheeks flushed. Her eyes locked on me. She didn't sit down. Just stood there, hands on her hips, looking like I'd broken some boundary. "You set me up," she snarled, loud enough for everyone to hear, but focused right at me. The noise halted again. All eyes on us. I leaned back in my chair, calm as could be, and looked up at her. "No, Olivia," I said, my voice steady. "You did that to yourself." Her mouth opened, then shut. Like she couldn't find the words. She wasn't used to me pushing. "Back. Not like this." The family jumped in before she could try again. Jen snorted, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, Liv. You got caught, that's all. Don't act like he's the villain here." Mike chipped in, his tone flat. "You took his money, lied about it. What did you expect him to do? Applaud you?" Tom didn't say anything, just stared at her, his displeasure stronger than words. Caroline popped her head out then, still in the doorway, trying to back her up. "It's not that simple. You're all blowing this out of But Tom cut her off, his voice loud. "Caroline, you're